Historical context. The cotton gin was invented in 1794 by Eli Whitney at the dawn of the American Industrial Revolution. At this time, many significant historical events were taking place around the world, such as the French Revolution, the Whiskey Rebellion, and the invention of the steamboat and the spinning jenny. In America, George Washington, the first president, was trying to help build the new country. But despite his efforts, the economy was suffering due to the costs of war and the difficulty of navigating European trade. As America was in economic shambles, the citizens were looking for any way to make money, and one of these ways was by gambling by betting on sporting events. Due to this, sporting events such as cockfighting, horse racing, boxing, and dancing were becoming increasingly popular. Similar to many other countries around the world when they began, the United States heavily relied on enslaved laborers for economic stability and growth. Almost all of the South, as well as at least half of the North, still had enslaved laborers. The cotton gin was invented to lessen the enslaved people's work to optimize their production. However, in the process of lessening their workload, the cotton gin actually ended up creating a greater demand for more enslaved laborers, partially doing the opposite of its intended purpose. Thesis statement. The advent of Samuel Slater's mill and Whitney's cotton engine thrust the United States into the Industrial Revolution, precipitating many new inventions popping up every year. Although Whitney's cotton gin reduced the labor needed to process cotton by automatically separating the seeds from the fibers, it ultimately increased demand for enslaved labor. Over time, not only did cotton expand the agrarian Southern economy, it even helped spark the growth of textile factories in the North, and supplied cotton fiber to use as thread. Overall, Whitney's invention forged a frontier in history as it revolutionized the American economy. How does the cotton gin work? To understand the effect the cotton gin had on enslaved laborers and the cotton industry as a whole, it is important to know the mechanics of a cotton gin. To start, the purpose of the cotton gin is to mechanically separate the seeds from the cotton instead of enslaved men, women, and children doing it by hand. As the cotton goes through the machine, small hooks pull the cotton through the mesh. This allows for the seeds to separate as the cotton is worked through the mesh, which has holes big enough to allow the cotton to continue moving through it, but are still small enough to prevent the seeds from going through. At first, cotton gins were difficult to use, but over time, more people learned to use them, and they became more efficient. Cotton gin's impact on enslaved laborers. This map shows the enslaved population following a timeline from the year 1790 to 1860, which is vital to understanding the full effects of the cotton gin. After the invention of the cotton gin in 1794, a huge change in the enslaved population can be seen in just a couple of decades. The enslaved population dramatically increased, and so did the area in which their labor was required. As many as 80,000 humans were forcibly imported from Africa between 1790 and 1808. In the decades following, the number of enslaved peoples peaked between 1850 to 1860. Specifically, the enslaved population was extremely dense in the South, as this is where the cotton industry was booming. The enslaved population increased because the cotton gin made producing cotton easier than ever before. This meant the demand for slaves increased so that cotton could be planted and harvested quicker and in greater quantities to feed the cotton gins so they could supply northern textile mills. How did this benefit America's economy? Whitney invented the cotton gin a decade after the Revolutionary War ended in 1783. The United States was in debt because of the war and had a declining economy that desperately needed help. Therefore, this invention ended up being vital to the economic growth of the young nation, especially the economy of the South. Other factors also stimulated the cotton industry. Soon after the cotton gin was invented, other inventions like the steamboat, which could transport cotton, made it a much more valuable and accessible resource. After 10 years of the cotton gin being put to use, the total value of crops in the United States increased from $150,000 to $8 million. In the mid-19th century, major port areas like New Orleans annually carried cargo which mainly contained cotton that was worth $220 million, or over a few billion dollars today. The reason the cotton industry grew in the South was that the South had much better soil and a longer growing season to grow cotton than the North. The South dominated the cotton industry, not just in America, but all over the world. In the mid-19th century, 2/3 of the cotton produced around the globe came from America's South. How the cotton gin impacted other industries. The cotton gin also boosted the economy in less direct ways. A lot of the North believed in free labor, which meant they believed people should work at their own will. The northern textile industry focused on manufacturing fabric such as yarn or pieces of clothing and was large in the north because that's where the factories and industries were primarily located. Northern industries relied heavily on southern cotton as it focused on making cloth and pieces of clothing, intertwining the economies of the south and north. Average citizens were also impacted by this as this became the beginning of the mass production of clothes. With this, the price of clothes was reduced and became much more accessible for people with less money. How the cotton gin helped the economy with the expansion of the southern geography. With the invention of the cotton gin, many slave owners saw this as an opportunity to utilize more land area to produce more cotton. During the few decades following 1793, the South had greatly expanded westward. As can be seen in the map, which shows the enslaved population, America expanded westward for more land and went to areas that had previously not been settled by Americans. Because more cultivable land had become available for planting, the cotton industry was able to grow in the South without any geographical barriers. The downfall of the cotton industry. While the cotton gin sparked the boom in the cotton industry, over time America became reliant on the cotton industry to sustain the economy. But cotton would not remain king. The Civil War, fought to liberate enslaved people, caused other countries to seek another source of cotton. Soon, Egypt and India started to raise production and exports, catching up to America. Also, as time went on, the price of cotton decreased, making it a less profitable item. To put this into perspective, cotton exports from the United States decreased by over $150 million from before the Civil War to the end of the Civil War. Then, the war ended with the abolition of slavery, and the labor supply adapted to a sharecropper system. While cotton remained an important resource, it was no longer a staple of the American economy. Did people oppose the cotton gin? Whitney had a plan to make a good profit from his cotton gin. This plan included putting many of his cotton gins in Georgia and throughout the South. While his cotton gin was extremely efficient, many farmers in states like Georgia did not initially want to use it because of the tax that Whitney had placed. They felt the tax, which was 2/5 of the profit, was outrageously high. To combat this, they started inventing their own cotton gins and claiming their inventions were completely new. Conclusion. Although it is obvious that the cotton industry is no longer the main industry of the South, cotton gins are still used to this day to separate seeds from cotton. These days, cotton gins have become much more efficient and elaborate. Despite the negative effects that cotton gin had on American society and politics, indirectly perhaps including civil war, the significant impact it had on the growth of the U.S. economy and expansion of U.S. territory to the west cannot be overstated. Not only did Eli Whitney's cotton gin help expand the U.S., it changed the economy and industries of America forever. The cotton gin was certainly the most impactful invention on the early American economic frontier.